Tune into a podcast made by the fans for the fans. This is the Drive for Five podcast. Welcome to the Drive for Five podcast, hosted by David Lazar.
Welcome back to the Drive for Five podcast. My name is David, and I am here with Jared and Harris. Today we have a very special episode for you guys. As our fifth episode, we have a special guest on, Mr. Arthur Staple. We are very happy to announce that he is giving up some time while he's on his California trip, and we are very excited to talk to him and ask him about the current state of the Islanders and some questions we have about the future. So I'm going to come to Jared for our first question. Take it away.
Hi, Mr. Staple. Thank you for coming on today.
Great. Great to be here, Jared. Go ahead.
So the first question I have is that today Doug Waite said that Alan Klein will be back after this road trip, and he seemed excited when saying that. As a coach, when a player is injured and returning, it's nice, but this for the Islanders is going to create a surplus of players. And it would seem likely that the Islanders would maybe waive Ryan Pulock or send down Matt Barzal. Could you see either of these happening, or do you think Alan Klein's going to be waived and most likely sent to Bridgeport when he isn't claimed?
That's an interesting question. Like you said, Doug Waite mentioned that probably after this trip is over, Klein will be ready to be activated off IR. My guess would be, considering he didn't really have any training camp, that he'd probably go to Bridgeport for a conditioning stint, which I believe can last up to a week or 10 days. So that probably have to do with him next week. They do only have 13 forwards and a couple guys still banged up. Cal Clutterbuck's probably going to be back. He took an awkward hit in practice yesterday, so I'm not sure about his availability. So, these things are always pretty fluid. I get that a lot of fans are always worried about what's going to happen a week or two from now, but it's as everybody knows, it's a rough sport. Guys get injured, whether it's a serious injury or just a minor injury, that kind of helps them juggle things roster-wise. So I'm not really too sure what they're going to do, but when the time comes, there may be a little bit more of a clearer answer with Klein in maybe a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. It just seems like a very Islanders thing to do, to make a big, possibly send down Barzal or send down Pulock because they haven't exactly been performing. But glad to see that Kleiner will get some conditioning in, definitely much needed. So thank you for answering that. And one thing that I was just wondering, with the new coaching staff and led by Doug Waite, he raved about Scott Mayfield. And when he was the assistant, he loved Scott Mayfield. And one thing I'm noticing, a common theme, is that, Doug Waite kind of has a man crush on Mayfield. And, it wasn't expected that he'd have an everyday role for the Islanders. I know that you tweeted out, maybe in July or something, that he could be playing opening night. But one thing that I'm noticing is that he's kind of taken on that 5th or 6th D role over Ryan Pulock, obviously, and possibly a struggling Dennis Seidenberg. So as the season goes on, can you see Scott Mayfield being an everyday defenseman, whereas Ryan Pulock or Dennis Seidenberg, is a healthy scratch every so often?
Yeah, based on what we've seen so far, it's even just I think some of the possession numbers bear this out. The Thomas Hickey Scott Mayfield pairing has been pretty much their best pairing 5-on-5. Mayfield's really a bit of an eye opener for me when I started. When he really came up and was kind of on the radar of maybe being on the fringe of a roster spot a few years ago. You didn't really see a guy who had the skating ability or the decision-making ability to be an everyday defenseman. I remember when he was kind of pressed into emergency duty the last couple of games of the Washington series. He had the physical edge, and he was willing to dish out the punishment that a big defenseman, stereotypically saw a completely different player. There was a lot of growth. There was a lot more decisiveness in the plays that he was making and the decisions he was making, pinching up, making strong moves in the offensive zone. Had his head up, was moving the puck well, and still adding that physical element of clearing the crease and trying to work hard in the corners in his own end. And really, of those three young guys, of Pelech and Kulak and Mayfield, I think he's the guy that's taken the biggest step forward since they were drafted and since they joined the organization. So I don't necessarily think it's a special affinity that Doug Wade has for him. I think he just is really pleased with the steps that Mayfield's taken to become an everyday defenseman, and really, he's not the guy that's going to come out of the lineup if it's a change, whether it's Seidenberg or Kulak going in. I think he and Hickey are really solidifying themselves, kind of the way that DeHaan and Seidenberg did last year, a bit of a surprise pairing that ended up being relatively solid for the Islanders, and one that Wade relied on a lot the second half of the season. I think Hickey and Mayfield are really playing the way that he wants the D to play, and I think as he said today, that the six that have been playing pretty good. I know there's been a couple of mistakes from DeHaan and that ended up in their net, but really at 5-on-5, this group of defensemen is moving the puck well and forcing other teams to defend as opposed to having to stand around and try to kick the puck out of their own end. So I don't think it's anything really against Ryan Kulak. He was definitely at the back of the pack once coming out of training camp of the three young guys that were pushing for spots, and I think the fact that he hasn't gotten into a game isn't necessarily a knock on him. It's more how the other guys have been playing. So I would imagine you're going to see Ryan Kulak get in a couple of games at some point, maybe even this weekend. But he's got to play well because these other guys are playing pretty well to keep their spots.
Yeah, speaking of Ryan Pulock, I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I was just wanting to ask a little more of, he was supposed to, just a specific question, he was supposed to really, I was pretty confident last year looking at, Ryan Pulock had an injury, but, he was supposed to be that big guy. And then Calvin DeHaan really played amazingly. And, I thought that we made the Travis Hamnick deal originally because we had Ryan Pulock in the wings, and that second pairing of DeHaan and Pulock would really be an effective pairing. But they haven't used it yet. And it kind of has been a 1, 2A, 2B type system, it looks like. So for Ryan Pulock, not really seeing the time on ice this year that he's probably expected, do you think that, if the Islanders are looking to use him to get him into some games, that they'll do that soon? I know you just said this weekend, but do you see him being a bench player for the whole year if the defense continues to play well and there's no injuries? Or do you see him, as everyone expects, coming into the lineup and being an everyday player soon?
Pulock's only 23, 22 maybe. I'm not really sure. Still a very young guy, and I know he's pretty much 3 full seasons in the AHL, and kind of done all he can do down there. And really, the fact that he needs waivers to go down is pretty much the only reason he's not back in the AHL. And I think he was given a pretty fair shake to earn a regular spot, or at least be in the lineup opening night last week. And he didn't really take it. It's nothing personal against Ryan Pulock. He's the guy that's got the biggest upside, having been a first-round pick, scoring the goals and having the big slap shot. The guy who could help their power play. But I think the power play part is not a big enough part to just throw him out there and have him play 18 minutes a game at even strength. He's just, I think it's a confidence issue with him. We've certainly seen in the playoffs a couple of years ago the way that he can play at this level and be a hard player to play against in his own end and move the puck quickly. Didn't really get a chance last year before he got hurt, and never really worked his way back in.
Okay, so Harris, I know you have a question you want to ask. Take it away.
Hello, Mr. Staple. This is Harris. Thanks for coming on. I know this is a long road trip, the Western road trip for you guys. Thanks for coming on. But we have a real question for you about, maybe upgrading this team a little bit, because the Islanders right now look like the team start out of the gate from last season. Is there any chance that the Alex Galchenyuk or the Matt Duchene sweepstakes are still around, or have they just completely gone away? And if they could help us?
Well, Galchenyuk is not exactly being, I guess, showcased as the words used. He's playing on the fourth line, and in Montreal, another team that's having a lot of trouble scoring. So to me, Montreal is a place where, unless they're willing to make a Galchenyuk trade for someone, for a forward the Islanders don't need, and really, any scoring forward the Islanders have right now is certainly someone they need. So it'd be hard pressed to see who they could give up in a deal for Galchenyuk right now. Since the Canadians need scoring, and Galchenyuk, in theory, is a guy who could help them. And Duchene, Colorado's going pretty well right now. I know Duchene that situation is still where it was last year, but they've got a lot of exciting young guys now, and they're on a bit of a high, playing well early in the season. So who knows if that situation is one that Joe Sakic needs to resolve again right away. It certainly seemed like all of last season and into the off season that they had to trade Matt Duchene for the good of the team, for the good of the player, and really he never came off a very high asking price with a lot of teams, including the Islanders. And I think Garth Snow wasn't willing to give up Matthew Barzal. He wasn't willing to give up any of their prize goaltending prospects. So it was kind of a non-starter for those two teams. So I can't imagine that anything's changed right now, especially with the way the Avs have started the season. To my mind, this does not look like the same team as last year. Last year, when they were blowing a lot of those games, I'm reminded being out here now in San Jose that the game right after Thanksgiving, where they came back and tied in the final minute and then gave up the tie 20 seconds later, was, I believe, the fifth game that they lost in the last couple minutes of regulation, including two of the three on this road trip last year to go, I think, 4 games under 500, pretty much kill their season. That was a different team. That was a team that was struggling to stay in games, that was struggling to hold leads. This team, it's only been 4 games. It's hard to really make a lot of big judgments, even though I know fans can easily recall some bad starts to these Islander seasons over the last few years. But I think if you look at the way they're putting shots on net, you kind of throw out that first game because it was a disaster on a lot of different levels. It just seemed like they weren't ready to play. They came back and played well against Buffalo the next night. Played well against St. Louis, rallied to get a point. I thought they outplayed the Ducks for most of the game in Anaheim. It's a results business, as they say, so the 1-2-1 record doesn't look great at all. But I think the way that they're playing, especially with essentially a new head coach, a new coaching staff, a key new player in their offense, in Everly, I think you have to give them a couple more games before any big pronouncements are made. And really, I think they have the guys here, and this is what you have to live with when you have young guys in your lineup. Guys like Barzal, guys like Hosang, guys like Beauvillier. They're going to make some mistakes. Hosang has been electric. He's also had a couple of big turnovers. Barzal, similar. You can't just, drop 20 and 21-year-old guys into the NHL and have them be amazing right away. Not everybody's Connor McDavid. And you just have to look at guys like Jack Eichel or Sam Reinhart up in Buffalo to see that one or two even top tier picks can't turn the whole team around. And this team with the Islanders is a much better team to me than the Sabres. But still, when you have those young guys in key roles, you're going to have to live with a few mistakes and a few stops and starts. And I think that's what they've got so far, even though there's been some flashes of good play. They haven't scored enough goals. We'll have to see how they finish out this road trip, and then next week with a couple of key games when San Jose comes in, go to the Garden and play the Rangers for the first time, who also haven't been off to such a great start. So I think you give it 7 or 8 games before anybody hits the panic button, in my mind, and I don't necessarily think that those guys. There's not a big deal to be made right now unless you want to give up a Barzal or a Hosang or a first, one of those 2 first-round picks that they have in the draft coming up right away to try to get help in here. And really, if you do that, then more than just a young guy has to go because they're still within a couple million of the salary cap and will have to shed some salary. So there's a lot of factors that go into trying to make that kind of switch in the first month of the season. And all you have to do is think back to the Matt Molson, Thomas Vanek I think it's got to be a little bit more wait and see with this team, at least for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. I agree. Just the one scary, thing is just, just what happened last year. Being proactive to, make sure that doesn't happen again would be nice. But this team does look better. One thing we're not seeing is these late games. There just doesn't look like they're getting lucky. Their zone time's good. Their D's a little shaky, but overall it's looking okay. But one thing that has been a storyline going in and has continued to be a storyline is the goaltending tandem of Thomas Greiss and Yaroslav Halak. Both have played equal. They've split so far. And I saw Thomas Greiss play on Monday. I was there, and he looked great. I've seen Yaroslav Halak play. He looked great in some games, but then they've also kind of looked shaky at times. And one thing that I'm just kind of wondering is you have this tandem right now, and it seems like Waite kind of likes it. But if one of them, starts playing hot, will they take over? Or do you see a tandem like this kind of working for the whole year, even though last season this tandem wasn't exactly the best?
Well, I don't think we've ever really seen these two play together for a long stretch of time, other than the end of last season, and that was really kind of desperation mode, to try to get into the playoffs, and that was really, Wade deciding to go with Halak because Greiss just seemed pretty worn down after playing so many games in the previous couple of months. So, I think they feel pretty good about this tandem. I didn't love Halak's game in Anaheim. I thought, the first goal rebound that he gave up early in the game wasn't great, and then the one that ended up being the winner in the third period got through him. Probably shouldn't, but Wade has said Thomas Greiss is going to play here in San Jose tomorrow. I assume that means that Halak goes in LA the next night, and then that's really a stretch of whatever 6 games in about 10 days, where I would imagine that even if they had a clear number 1 and number 2 coming into the season, it would have been the split would have been 4 and 2 starts at minimum because of the 2 back-to-backs and essentially the 3 and 3.5 days to start the year that last weekend. So. You're always going to need a guy that everybody has a million back-to-backs, including the Islanders. I think it's 15 or 16 this year. So, it's incumbent on any NHL coach to make sure that they have both guys ready, especially to start the season. And I guess once we get back from this road trip, obviously there's a few days off and nothing, no back-to-backs for a couple of weeks. Maybe we'll see someone emerge in that time. But I think, like you said, you've seen a couple of good performances, or at least one good performance from both goalies and one not so good performance from both goalies. And I'm sure Doug Wade would love to have them both playing lights out and pushing each other to be the clear number 1, and that hasn't happened quite yet. I sort of thought going into the season that Halak would be the guy to get if there was going to be a majority of the starts to go to one goalie, it would be to go to Halak, just because that's the way that he's been at his best in years past, is when he gets more starts. But you have to hope that both guys are professionals and understand the situation, and certainly from Halak's end, who's hasn't been happy with some of the situations he's been in the last couple of years with the Islanders in terms of having the 3 goalies there and not being as healthy as he would like. So you certainly have to guard against that. But I think once this weekend is through, and you hope that you get performances from both goalies like you got in the preseason, where they both make a lot of key saves and don't look too busy in net, and we'll see where they stand after that. But like I said, if someone's going to get 45 starts or getting close to 50 starts, I would have thought it would be Halak. But I thought Greiss was really good against St. Louis, and maybe if he pitches another good one tomorrow night here, and Halak isn't so good in LA, or Greiss gets back-to-back starts, maybe we start to see someone emerge as we get into the part of the season in the next few weeks, where there's not quite so many games condensed close together.
So the next question that I actually have is, what's the deal with Mike Bossy? It seemed as if he's been doing more things in Montreal, like going on the radio, talking about Tavares and the contract ordeal. And even though it's most likely he's not trying to hurt the Islanders, is he undermining the team a bit with coming up with this story about Tavares?
Well, maybe you should try to have him on your show and see what he says.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
I don't I don't know Mike that well. I used to talk to him a lot when he worked for the Islanders a few years ago, but he's his own man. He doesn't work for the team. He's a TV and radio personality now, and he talk about things that get noticed. I guess I think it's no different than hearing what Mike Milbury has to say or anybody else that's on TV or on the radio to draw attention and viewers and listeners. So I don't necessarily think he's got any special insight to Tavares' situation. I think he kind of got unfairly painted as being the one who threw out the John Tavares rejected the $84 million offer. That was, I think, the host of the show that he was on up in Quebec, and that was not true. But yeah, I don't know that he's got any special vendetta against the Islanders either. I think he's just a guy who's a former player who's giving his opinion on the radio, and if he seems to feel that the Islanders would trade John Tavares after January 1 if they're not in it, then I guess that's his viewpoint. I don't necessarily think that's the case, and I haven't heard anything to indicate that's the case. The Islanders want John Tavares there long term. They've clearly shown that they want him there long term by not even pretending to offer him around the league when his camp told Garth Snow and the Islanders they weren't interested in talking extension this past summer. You would have thought that if they were going to even entertain the idea, they would have quietly shopped him around the draft the way the Islanders did with Kyle Pozo a couple of years before when they knew they weren't going to re-sign him going into his final contract year. But and as far as I know from John Tavares' side, it's exactly what he said. He's taking his time to see what happens with the arena situation, see what happens with the team on the ice and the front office structure, if any of those things are going to change. And then he's going to make his decision. I still think he's leaning towards staying, especially if the arena situation comes out in the Islanders' favor before we get to next summer. I think that's the biggest factor of knowing where they're going to play and just having a timeline for that. And if they're out of it by January 1, to me, they were out of it by January 1 last year, and they managed to miss the playoffs by just a point. So I don't really see where that's relevant right now. I can't see a scenario where they fall apart that much. And to my mind, the stuff on the ice and how this team goes, I think he's genuinely excited about what guys like Barzal and Hosang have brought to the team, and feels like there's a decent future with this organization in terms of the personnel that Garth Snow's assembled. So we'll have to see if all that changes in a couple months, and if they fall down a hole this early part of the season, maybe that will change things. But I don't see that happening either.
Yeah, one thing that I remember, it was a crazy moment because I remember exactly where I was, and I have notifications for your tweets, and I remember it must have been in June or May, and I remember you tweeted something along the lines of, I wish I had the exact tweet, but it was something along the lines of, if John Tavares isn't signed, by the trade deadline, or I forget the exact date, that, it would be hard to not entertain the idea of trading him. And I remember I wrote something up about that. I was really shocked. But Javier, he's unsigned right now, obviously, and it seems like he's saying all the right things. He's a gentleman. He's great. He's certainly not making me panic as much as some other fans. But what I'm wondering is, have your opinions changed slightly about a Tavares trade? Because I don't know if a Tavares trade would ever happen. That would be crazy. I don't even know. That'd be one of the biggest trades of all time. But can you see, what are your views on the Tavares trade idea as of now?
I mean, to my mind, in theory, if they are out of it when the end of February rolls around, you have to consider trading him, unless you know that he's going to stay, in which case you don't bother. So there's, the things that are happening behind the scenes in terms of his camp and the Islanders camp, keeping in touch, and the Islanders owners keeping Pat Brisson, Tavares' agent, apprised of what's happening with the arena situation. Not a lot of that stuff seeps out very much, and really what the Islanders know about their bid to get a new arena at Belmont Park, they share almost immediately with Pat Brisson, Tavares' agent. And they've done so for all of last year. So, I think you speak logically about those kinds of situations where you say if the Islanders are 10 points out of the playoffs by the trade deadline, then sure, you've got to explore trading all of your expiring contracts, especially a guy who could help someone win a Stanley Cup like that. But I think this is a special circumstance, and to my mind, unless he says I want out, I don't see it happening, because he's the guy that they want to be the cornerstone of this organization for the next 8 years, as he did for the previous 9. And you can't just throw that kind of goodwill away, I would imagine, for a couple months or getting back a couple draft picks and a prospect. So, I think, like I said, you look at these things logically, but logic doesn't always enter into it. You're not always aware of all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So I think, you certainly don't want to, and if you're an Islander fan, you don't want to even see that scenario come up to have to make that kind of choice. So I don't think they'll be out of it by the trade deadline, but if they are, maybe that changes things, because that'll be a long time between now and then, and another long season for John Tavares. Maybe that'll change his mind, but I think the only way that he gets traded is if he tells them, I'm not staying, and you should probably think about moving me. So that hasn't happened yet, and I don't think the Islanders want that to happen, so they're not entertaining that idea at all for now.
Yeah, that'd be definitely a sad day. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but one thing that certainly is playing a big role in this Tavares saga is, what's going on behind the scenes. As you say, as a casual fan, we may have, a few sources, whatever, but we don't really have any idea of what's going on with this whole arena thing. But one thing that we were notified about, which was, common news, was that, Islanders will be playing at Barclays next season. That was just announced, and that was expected. But one thing you said last year on the podcast, it was right in the hype of the whole Hartford thing, and it was it was Hartford, and we had Andy Graziano on a week prior say that Hartford was like a possibility, and we were all scared about that. And then you actually came on and surprised us by saying the Islanders would be in Barclays for longer than we thought. And I'm just asking, have the plans kind of stayed the same, where the Islanders could be in Barclays for the next 3 or 4 years until something happens with the Belmont development?
I think the timeline for the Islanders, as I understand it, is they'd ideally like to have this new building if they win the bid. They'd like to open it for the 2020-21 season. So that would mean after this year they're staying in Barclays for 18-19. So that means they need a place to play for 2019-20. Could it be Barclays? Sure. They're already there. They can try to work out another 1-year extension, I guess, beyond what they've got right now, and whatever financial arrangements they need to make with their dealings with Barclays Center, they'd have to make. Could it be the Coliseum? Far less likely, but also remote possibility, I guess, if they're just doing it on a 1-year thing. The Coliseum, as it sits right now, is not suited to house an NHL team, not just from the things inside the arena, but the locker room situation, whatever amenities the Islanders would need to have aren't in there. So that would require Barclays to spend some money to upgrade it. For just 1 year, it doesn't seem very likely that they do that. And I guess then after that, you have what you'd call the wild cards, places like Madison Square Garden, because Madison Square Garden is involved with the Islanders' bid. Their partners, MSG, owns a big piece of the Oakview Group, which is helping advise the Islanders and will invest a bit in this new arena. So that could be a possibility, although that's pretty far-fetched just because the Garden obviously has a lot of stuff going on, and to juggle everything around to add in Islanders dates would be a real difficult task. I guess you could throw in any other arena in the tri-state area. Hartford, probably not. That's a little far. Bridgeport, too small. Prudential Center, maybe. They've got a few things going on there, too. So that's the timeline that I heard that they're working off of. There's all kinds of things that could delay it, whether there's a lawsuit from a community group around the Belmont Park area that could push things back. So I think they've got to stay flexible in this scenario, and to my mind, if you're shooting for 2021, maybe it's a year further, and you've got to think about 2 years is where you're going to play. To me, Barclays Center makes the most sense because they're already there. To have the setup with their locker room. They have the setup. The guys are used to the routine as much as they don't like it. And you can probably work out something financially, and that's the easiest way to do it. So, yeah, there's still a lot of variables still to go with this thing, and obviously New York State hasn't even chosen anybody yet to develop the site, so it's all a bit premature right now. But I imagine the Islanders feel like they have a pretty comprehensive bid, and if they win it, and it's announced that they win it, that will ease a lot of minds, I'm sure, among the fans and certainly among the organization people, because it doubles back to what we were just talking about with John Tavares, that maybe that's the sort of certainty he was looking for before he wants to agree to a deal.
Yeah, so going back to the bid thing about Belmont, and we also know that NYC, the soccer team, is also bidding for a new stadium near Belmont. How likely is it that they would win? That the Islanders would end up winning this bid?
You know, we were talking about logic and common sense before, and certainly those are two things that we all use to evaluate these situations when we don't know a lot about the ins and outs of them. But when it comes to state politics and local politics, I feel like logic and common sense doesn't always apply to who they choose for these bids. So I have to caution everybody that I know nothing about state politics and local politics out there. And even the people that cover it on our end at Newsday sometimes get surprised by the way that some of these decision makers operate. But the NYCFC bid, it sounds pretty good, and it's obviously got the backing of the Yankees. But is that their final destination? Is that where they really want to go? It doesn't seem to be that way. That they want to stay somewhere in the five boroughs. So and who knows? And how a 26,000 seat or whatever size soccer stadium, if that is utilitarian as a closed roof hockey arena, can also house things obviously during the winter. So I think when you're choosing between those two bids, and there's a third bid that's centered more around retail development. The sports fan in all of us says, well, of course we want an arena because then the Islanders have a place to play, and the other considerations kind of fall by the wayside. But that's not always the way that state developers think, and community activists think, and residents who don't give two hoots about hockey or any other sport think. So, from where we sit, the Islanders bid looks like the best bid, and maybe that's the case with the state, but who knows what other factors go into it, and who knows what sort of timeline they're working on. I've heard 4 to 6 months, I've heard sooner, I've heard longer, so I guess we just have to wait and see when the word comes down, and you look at the partners that the Islanders owners have assembled. Like I said, Oakview Group, which has pretty strong backing from the Rangers owners, Sterling Properties, which is backed by the Mets owners. Those are all entities that have dealt with city and state politicians and decision makers and commissioners for a long time. So that should really help these Islanders owners who haven't really forayed into that area very much before. So again, logic says they do have the best bid, but who knows what can happen after that.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like they have the best bid. Islanders have not been had the best luck with politics, certainly, in their history. We were talking to Alan Hahn maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a little longer, and he told us this story about Charles Wang. We asked him how he felt about him. He was the beat writer during that time, and he was just talking about the Lighthouse Project and how he wanted nothing more than for this to go through, and how it was just politics that completely derailed this. And Islanders fans seem to think that Charles Wang was a bad owner, and really nothing could be further from the truth, because he wanted nothing more than for Islander fans to have this place and really thrive in a community, and it just didn't work out for him. So it'd be kind of sad to see something similar happen to Ledecky and Malkin. I've talked to Ledecky a bunch of times. He seems like the nicest guy in the world, so I would really hate to see something happen. So it's good that they have Dolan and some of the Nets owners to really back them, because, to be honest, they may need it with everything that's going on. So that's it for our interview with Arthur Staple. We are very thankful that he was able to come on and give us some of his time during a busy trip for him. But right now, we just want to talk about some of this interesting stuff he said. There were certainly some things that we didn't know about going into the interview, so we thank him for telling us some really interesting things. But first, before we do that, I just want to have a brief message from our sponsor. The Drive for 5 podcast is sponsored by Canvasist. The Canvasist is an Instagram account and website where you can buy custom canvases for only $20. Plus, if you use our code at checkout, Drive for 5, DRIVE, 4 as in the number, and 5 spelled out, you'll get an extra 15% off. It's free shipping as well, so you can get a custom canvas the size of your entire wall for only $17. You can get any Islanders player or anything you want, and I know they look great. I know I have one. So please go check out the canvases, and you won't regret it. So that's it for that. Now we just want to talk about for a little bit what Arthur Staple said. We were very excited to have Arthur Staple on. He came on last year, and he said some interesting things about the arena dilemma that was currently going on. He said that the Islanders, that Hartford isn't a possibility, and that the Islanders would instead stay in Barclays Center for longer than we thought. Last week, we did find out that the Islanders would be staying in Barclays Center for next season. So what Arthur Staples said is that 2020 to 2021 season, which is in 2 years, he says that the Islanders, that's their goal for Belmont, 2020-2021 season. So that's pretty far away. So until then, he said that possibly Madison Square Garden's an option, Prudential Center. He said that Hartford isn't really an option, neither is Bridgeport. So he really said MSG, Prudential, and Nassau Coliseum is 3, but he basically specified that the Islanders are staying in Barclays until that, most likely. So, Jared, I want to come to you. How do you feel about Arthur Staples saying that the Islanders could be in Barclays Center for another 3 seasons?
I'm going to be honest, it kind of upsets me as a loyal Collie fan. It makes sense, but, I just hope maybe if things don't go right, maybe I hope they go right, but what I'm trying to say is that maybe if things go wrong, they'll get a season out in the Collie, which would draw a lot of fans, and it's just the Collie's a place that's really close to a lot of people. It has a lot of history, and I would love to see them maybe do a regular season thing there if it doesn't happen. But I think 2021 is a long time, and it makes sense that it would go out till then, because of how long it would take to build a stadium. But we also need to keep in mind Barclays Center doesn't want us there. So that could possibly mean playing in another arena for a season. And that stadium would most likely be the Nassau Coliseum. So if you're asking me, I'd say they're going to play in the Coliseum for a year if they don't get this Belmont deal done soon.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just the atmosphere at the Coliseum game when they played the Flyers in an exhibition matchup was out of this world. It was the craziest preseason game I've ever seen. And watching that really made me miss the Coliseum. And I don't think Islanders fans should want that to happen. Because if the Islanders are going to the Coliseum, that means Belmont isn't done and Barclays Center is in turmoil, basically. And so I really hope that the Islanders can get this Belmont thing underway. One thing I want to really point out, something else that Arthur Staples said, was that the Islanders are aiming to finalize the Belmont proposal in 4 to 6 months. And when you look at that, 4 to 6 months puts you right around the NHL trading deadline. So is it reasonable to expect that John Tavares won't be re-signed until 4 to 6 months? It really is. I can see the John Tavares saga really going until July 1st, just like Steven Stamkos did. And I think the arena situation could be a problem. So Coliseum possibly, Belmont possibly, but 2021 season is what Staple pinpointed. And I think that's important to point out because that's a long time away, and the Coliseum may be an option. So that's what we're going to talk about with the arena. Arthur Staples said a lot of interesting things there. One thing I just want to pinpoint on is some of the other stuff he said, because that was really interesting too. He said that Doug Weight really likes Scott Mayfield because Scott Mayfield has become a great player. Ryan Pulock may not be an everyday player, but keep in mind he's only 23. If he was eligible to be sent down with no waivers, he would be in Bridgeport right now. So that's kind of a scary thought coming out of Arthur Staples' mouth, but that's what he said, and that's basically what's happening. Arthur Staples said that Ryan Pulock isn't going to be that top 4 guy this year. unless he really breaks out. And it looks like right now Scott Mayfield's a top 6 guy, but it's still early in the season. We'll see what happens. Another thing he said is Alex Galchenyuk and Matt Duchene is not happening right now. That will happen later in the season. And he also said that Thomas Greiss and Yaroslav Halak may kind of stray away from the tandem if Yaroslav Halak plays a little better. So, Jared, how do you feel about any of those points?
Just one thing to keep in mind there is that Ryan Pulock needs to be making key plays, specifically on the power play, if he wants to see a lot of ice time. And with his hard shot, seeing key plays is a very big possibility. But if he's not having those key plays, he's going to get waived or even traded. And that's a big thing, because if he gets traded, that's a very big potential defender. That's a top 2 defender in the future to give away. So you're going to be wanting a decent amount back from him. And if he gets waived, he's going to get claimed. So there's a lot of cards to know what to think about when you're dealing with Ryan Pulock. And the same thing with Doug Wade. If he's going to put him in or keep him out.
Yeah, great point. I don't see Ryan Pulock getting traded or waived, but one thing I do see is Ryan Pulock could be a 7th D this year and possibly even next year. He's taking a longer time to develop, and I really don't think that they're going to rush him, just like they've been hesitant to do ever since Josh Bailey when they rushed him and things didn't work out. So just like Michael Dowd-Cole, just like all these prospects, they're not going to rush Ryan Pulock, and we may see him in a depth role. He may not be that guy that everyone expects right off the bat. So that's that. I just want to, again, thank Arthur Staple for coming on. It's so great that he gives up the time to do this with us. It's so appreciative on our part. Again, our website is drivefor5.blog. It's a fan page run by the fans for the fans. We have an Instagram, drive4 5. 4 is a number. 5 is spelled out. And we really just want, if you guys want a great Instagram account run by the fans for the fans, we're it for you. So we really want to thank all you guys for listening. We really want to thank Arthur Staple for coming on. So with that, guys, we're going to end it. And we hope you all have a great night and a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you for listening to the Drive for 5 podcast.